some of the keys for trying to understand whether there's a prophet that's actually published in the Hebrew Bible. Certain things will demonstrate that the prophet is a true prophet or not. So Muhammad was a prophet from his perspective. From our perspective, we don't know. It's possible that Ezekiel would have been put in an institution if he went down town in Washington and began preaching the visions that he saw. But Muhammad knew he was a prophet. From his perspective, he was 100% prophet. He received his prophecies directly from God. And when he preached in Medina, the Jewish community, who from their perspective knew he wasn't a prophet, didn't accept his prophecies. And not only did they not accept his prophecies, but they criticized him because he told stories and narrated material that was reminiscent of the Bible. The Quran has a lot of references to Abraham and to Jacob and to Moses and to Jesus. And these are references that are reminiscent of the Bible, but they don't occur the same way that they occur in the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament. So from the perspective of people who were familiar with the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament, they were wrong. From the perspective of the person who was giving the revelation, who hears it directly from God, of course they were correct. So who's right in this case? Depends, of course, on what side you're on. Let me just illustrate the problem. Because from our perspective, if we're not Muslim in this room, and we grow up with our knowing the stories from the Bible, we know what's really authentic, and we feel what isn't authentic. My daughter grew up with the Walt Disney video version of Cinderella. And when she was in middle school, one of her assignments was to read the Brothers Grimm version of Cinderella. And she was upset. She came home and she told us how wrong it was, the Brothers Grimm version. And of course, it was much more authentic than the Walt Disney version. But the first one that she heard and the one that she was trained to know and understand was the Disney version. So for her, that was the real deal. So this kind of tension exists. So when Muhammad received the revelations and he was criticized by the Jews for not knowing the stories correctly, his response was that the Jews were distorting their own scripture and the Christians were distorting their own scripture in order to belittle him or to show that he's not a true prophet, when they know darn well that their scripture is the same as his, because from his perspective, it's got to be right. And we see this embedded in the Quran as well. So if you go down 2 more boxes to Surah 3, that means chapter 3, there's a reference to some of them. There are some among them, the people of the book, who distort the book with their tongues, and you would think it's from the book, but it's not from the book. But they say it's from God, but it's not from God. They lie against God, and they know it. What do we do with these texts? They're a normal part of religious tension. The good news is, in the Quran, there are a whole series of other texts as well. The Quran, more so, I think, in my experience, than the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament, is actually tremendously open to religious pluralism. Let's take a look at the box that's just above this one, Surah 2, the cow. O you believers, and Jews, and Christians, and Sabaeans, we're not sure who the Sabaeans are. Whoever believes in God and the last day, and who has acted rightly, has their reward with their Lord. They shall not fear nor grieve. And I'm going to add to that the last box here. Let there be no compulsion in religion. The right path stands out clearly from error. Whoever rejects taghut, which is has 2 meanings. On the one hand, it means idolatry. On the other hand, it means error. It's similar to the Hebrew word ta'ut, which means error. Whoever rejects like religious error and believes in God has grasped unfailing support that will never give way. God is the hearer, the knower. So there is a sentiment in the Quran in addition to the resentment of a religious pluralism. And I think that is more so than the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament. And I'll tell you why I think that's the case. And then I want to kind of sum up and give a couple of other comments about relationship between Judaism and Islam and what you should know about Islam. And then I really want to open this up so we can have a discussion and questions. I forgot what I was going to do. Now I do know. In the world of the ancient Bible period, there was one expression of monotheism in a world of polytheism. For reasons that we don't understand, one community of people came to the realization or the understanding or the belief that there's one God that powers the universe. And that God has a special relationship with a people. It's natural, with that perspective, to see the world entirely as being foreign and as being dangerous, because the entire world, although the different tribes around worshiped different gods, from the perspective of Israel, they were engaged in basically the same religion, which was multitheism or polytheism. So the Hebrew Bible is quite strict in its reference to only one true religion, and that is the religion of Israel, that worships the God of Israel. And even those wonderfully welcoming texts in Isaiah and in Micah, who call for a time when all the world will come together in peace, it's really under a kind of a peace, under the rulership, if you will, of the Israelite God. It's a natural kind of worldview, a narrative, a way of constructing the world which is based on a historical context. It might not be great in terms of pluralism, but it's understandable. There's nothing evil about it. There's nothing bad inherently with that perspective. It's a natural perspective. When Christianity began to emerge into history, there was one basic establishment monotheism. There were different versions of Judaism when Christianity began to emerge, but there was a sense among the early followers of Jesus and those who rejected Jesus, among the monotheists, that there was one form of monotheism that was truly authentic. And that was, if you were Israelite, it was the religion of Israel. And if you were a follower of Jesus, it was the version that became eventually Christianity. What's important to remember is that in that historical context, there was a kind of a natural perspective, which was that religion, true religion, religious monotheism, was a zero-sum relationship. One was correct, the other was wrong. There had only been one expression of monotheism in a world of polytheism. When there is a new expression of monotheism, it's not inherently natural for the new expression to be able to live with the establishment, particularly if the establishment is trying to keep it from being successful. So it became a competition between two. Only one could be right. So we see an entire rejection of Christianity by Jews and Judaism, and we see an entire rejection of Judaism by Christians and Christianity. That is, Christianity comes to take the place to supersede Judaism. Now, if we move another 5 or 6 centuries later, when Islam is emerging in the Arabian Peninsula, there are at least 2 expressions of monotheism that are functional there, and they are very different from one another. Judaism and Christianity. And within Christianity, you have a number of different expressions that are in competition. And within Judaism, you have a number of different expressions that are in competition with one another as well. So the perspective of the Quran is not a zero-sum relationship with the establishment. The perspective of the Quran, which is entirely based on historical context, is one in which, well, there are already established monotheisms out there. Here is another one. We're better, but we don't take the place of. So rather than being supersessionist, as Christianity generally saw itself in relationship to Judaism, Islam sees itself as a corrective. It is correcting the faults and the errors that are inherent in Judaism and Christianity.